Hello and welcome to the Redmen TV. I'm Chris Pajak and I am joined by the Athletics' James Pearce today. James, thank you very much for joining me once again, mate.
Good to see you, mate. How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. I enjoyed your article this week about Michael Edwards, sporting director of Liverpool Football Club. But before we do get into it and dive in depth and detail into that article, we, as the Redmen TV, are backed by and supported by The Athletic, and you can get 50% off your yearly subscription by visiting www.theathletic.co.uk/Redmen News. Brings your subscription down to about £2.50 per annum, per month, in fact, apologies. That would be just far too cheap, wouldn't it, for the quality content that you and the likes of Simon Hughes are putting out on a daily and regular basis. Absolutely fantastic stuff. No ads, no annoying pop-ups. First month is free. Go over to theathletic.co.uk/Redmen News or Redmen TV to get your 50% off your subscription. James, I thought this was a brilliant article, first and foremost, mate.
Thank you.
I loved reading about Michael Edwards and a little bit more into sort of the person that he is, as well as the job that he's done. I think that's the new knowledge that I took away from the article.
Yeah, I think it just seemed like a topical thing to write about with Liverpool going to Old Trafford this weekend. And, to be honest, what made me think of it was, I keep on reading all this stuff about how, not only did United need a sporting director, but all this stuff about it needs to be, some United legend who, is well versed in the history and the traditions of the club and all the rest of it. And it just made me think, well, that's actually a lot of nonsense, isn't it? When you think, one of the absolute key figures behind Liverpool being champions of Europe and top of the Premier League and breaking all these records is a fella from Southampton who played reserve team football for Peterborough and had no links with Liverpool at all until 7-8 years ago. And in fact, I think in some ways it probably benefits Michael Edwards and Liverpool, the fact that he hasn't got that emotional tie because he's able to make very astute business decisions based on his head rather than his heart, I guess. So it was just obviously working for the Athletic now. You've got it's probably being given more time and space to work on articles like that, which means that you're able to to devote a lot of time to speaking to people that work with Michael Edwards, at various levels of the club, and hopefully, provide a bit of an insight that that not many people know about. A guy who's a very, very private man. There's very few people as senior as him in football who keep a lower profile because he just isn't interested in being in the limelight.
Why do you think that is? Is it just the type of person that he is, or do you think he sees there's a business benefit to it, or what?
I think it's probably more the former. I think it is just the way he is. I think you see some sporting directors and they love having that their name up in lights, and they love being a public figure. You think of the likes of Monchi and Stuart Webber at Norwich. You quite often read quotes from them. I think speaking, he's just a private guy. Michael Edwards, very humble in terms of he's more than happy for Jurgen Klopp to be the public face of Liverpool Football Club, and it suits him to crack on behind the scenes, doing what he loves and doing what he does best. And I think probably one of the reasons why him and Mike Gordon get on so well is they're actually very similar. I think Mike Gordon is the same really in terms of very rarely do you ever see him quoted on anything because he doesn't want to be in that spotlight. But they're two hugely influential people pulling the strings in the background.
One of the things that I found interesting when you were talking then is obviously you said that Jurgen Klopp obviously is the guy who's going to take all the credits and stuff. Now Jurgen is that type of a person where he just loves speaking. I think he just loves talking to people in different ways and talking about things that he loves and he's passionate about. But actually, when you talk to Jurgen about, say, him and his job, he's also the same as Mike Gordon in that he has to have the limelight shone on him. That's the way it is. But when you actually say, "Oh, how are you doing such a good job?" He's actually the first to say, "It's the people around me," and it all filters down. So we've got a lot of humble people in charge, really, haven't we?
Yeah, and I think speaking to people researching for that article, that was the thing that kept on getting kind of reiterated and echoed was the fact that that Michael Edwards, Mike Gordon, and Jurgen Klopp, almost like the Holy Trinity running Liverpool, that they're all like that. That if and not just Klopp when he's in front of the cameras, but behind the scenes as well. You give any of those three of them praise and say, you must be so proud of how this player's doing or how the team's performing, and their default position is always to deflect the praise onto someone else. Whether that's the recruitment staff, and whether it's Dave Fallows or Barry Hunter, and you think back to Klopp when Salah was breaking all those records, scoring 40-odd goals in his first season at the club, and it would have been very easy for Klopp to to basically say, yeah, thanks very much. I always knew that Mo would and what was he was absolutely at pains to salute the likes of Fallows and Hunter and Michael Edwards for the work they've done behind the scenes, and even Peller's hands up and said, they were the ones that convinced me. I'm not going to sit here and say that it was all my idea, which I think you would get. I think it's quite rare in elite level football to get people who are obviously that good at their jobs who don't have those personal ego trips. That they're just that they're very much in it. They're in it all together, and I think that's there's. You'd be here all day talking about Jurgen Klopp's strengths, but one of his unbelievable strengths, as far as I'm concerned, is just that even though he's absolutely world class and elite, he doesn't think he knows everything, and he's comfortable enough in his own skin to surround himself with really knowledgeable people. He doesn't, some managers surround themselves with yes men because they don't want anyone who's perceived to be a threat or something, but Klopp, you look at it right the way through from, bringing in Andreas Kornmeier on the fitness side of things, Mona Nemmer with nutrition, Thomas Grunemark with the set pieces, Pep Linders, the way his responsibilities have increased. He's sometimes there's a picture of Klopp as this, Mr. Motivator, and he goes a hell of a lot deeper than that. We've seen it so often, haven't we, with the marginal gain side of things in terms of just surrounding himself with good people. And I think that's why it works with him and Mike Gordon and Michael Edwards, because, I think I mentioned it in the article, Klopp and Edwards don't always see eye to eye on everything, and they're not best mates, they don't socialise together. It's very much a professional relationship, but Michael Edwards isn't afraid to call things as he sees it. He's not afraid to say no if he thinks the right answer's no. And that's, and when they do have disagreements on stuff, it's quickly, they move on to the next thing, and nothing festers, and that's a very healthy state of affairs.
It's been a week of almost anniversaries, hasn't it? I mean, we're talking on the day of the beach ball anniversary, 10 years of that. less we say about that, the better. But also, we've had 4 years of Jurgen Klopp. We've had 9 years of FSG. And you were looking obviously ahead to Manchester United on Sunday. And we're looking at the state of Manchester United as a football club. And I think, the one major difference for me, and I think you posed this question at the end of your article, is that there is no Michael Edwards-like figure over at Manchester. Now, they could win against us at Old Trafford, or we could beat them. But the fact remains, the two sides are miles apart at present. And one of the reasons for that is the lack of a Michael Edwards-style figure. Yeah,
well, there's no doubt about that. I think it's been a very common complaint, hasn't it, from the United side of things for a few years now, that they haven't got it right in terms of the structure off the pitch. I mean, Ed Woodward seems a master at sealing noodle deals and all the rest of it with various partners all over the place. And
the interesting thing about that, James, is actually over the last few years he's not standout in the commercial side of things. He changed the game. He broke the marketplaces up, and he had a car market, had a car commercial deal in America and China and whatever. Since then, the reason that Manchester United are actually making money is the television deals, and everybody's shared in that. And I think Edward was first a banker. In fact, he was one of the fellas who instigated and pulled off the Glazers' takeover of Manchester United. And that's why they're so loyal to him, isn't it? And then you look back and you think, you talked about that structure, and I think you're absolutely spot on. Because when Ferguson left, their structure left with him. Not just him, one of the best managers that the sport has ever seen, but their structure has gone with Ferguson there, and they've still not replaced him in all the facets of the business, have they?
No. And I think we've seen it so often, haven't we? And just the bizarre decisions that United have made. You look at recruitment, and the kind of they've spent an absolute fortune since Ferguson walked away. Yet it's that squad is an absolute mess, and obviously you're thinking touch wood because there's a big game coming up on Sunday, and you don't want to tempt fate. But regardless of what happens on Sunday, it doesn't really change the overall picture. That it's crazy, isn't it, to think that what we so soon into the season and 15-point gap between the teams already, and things like selling Lukaku and getting rid of Sanchez and not bringing in anyone, and just very, very odd. And then you contrast that to Liverpool, where I think although there was a decent number of fans frustrated last summer that Liverpool didn't do more in the transfer market, at least you knew that it was a coherent plan that they'd stuck to. That had been the word from the back end of last season, that the attitude was, we're actually very happy with what we've got. We've got players coming back from injury. We've got young players coming through. Unless something massive presents itself out of the blue, there's unlikely to be many signings. And obviously at the time, a lot of people went, "Oh, they would say that. They're not going to show your hand or whatever." But it proved to be true. And and there's been so many times where you've got the sense at times where United have bowed to pressure and gone and wasted money, where Liverpool just don't. And that's testament to Mike Gordon, Michael Edwards, and Klopp. The fact that they've made so many good calls. And Michael Edwards, he's been absolutely essential to that. I mean, one of my favourite stories that someone told me that I included in the piece was, they said, here's a little challenge for you. Go, and I hadn't really thought about this. They said, go and try and look for photos of Michael Edwards from after the Champions League final. Because a lot of sporting directors would have been right in the thick of those celebrations, wanting it to be me. But they said there's hardly any pictures anywhere of Michael Edwards, and even when all the staff were on the podium as part of the celebrations, Michael Edwards was round the back of the podium taking pictures on his phone of the Liverpool fans celebrating, because it's just not him to be grabbing the trophy and throwing his arm around Klopp. And I think he was next to Klopp on the open top bus on the parade, certainly for part of it. But someone else said that was because the senior players like Van Dijk and Henderson had said to him, you've been crucial to this. You need to be part of it. So yeah, I think there's probably a misconception sometimes, because I think obviously because of the friction that existed there with Rodgers and the transfer committee and everything there, I think, and because obviously Michael Edwards doesn't really have much of a public profile, so he hasn't necessarily gone public to almost change people's opinions of this idea that he's like the laptop geek who goes around with all the spreadsheets and says, well, no, you can't do that because that pass percentage wasn't over 85% or whatever. And just then they said that couldn't be more wrong. And also they said don't. A number of people said to me, don't mistake being private for being aloof or secretive or strange or anything like that, because he said they said he like a real decent fella around Melwood. That I think what someone was saying about ensuring that everyone that works at Melwood shared in the celebration of Madrid, and going out of his way to ensure bonuses that the same level applied to the ladies in the canteen as it did to all of the sports science staff. And so I think one phrase that someone said was he's very decisive and astute, but also a compassionate guy as well. And his responsibilities obviously go way beyond just the recruitment side of things as well. With he's been massive in terms of all the planning that's gone into the new training ground. He's essentially the main man with that project. And the other thing that someone said that hadn't really occurred to me is that it's actually not very often he's actually at Liverpool's matches. I think someone said to me they think he's been to 3 or 4 so far this season, which when you think of how well Liverpool have been doing, the easiest thing would have been to plonk yourself in the front row of the director's box and bask in all the recognition that comes your way. But I think for Michael Edwards, he thinks, well, what is the benefit to Liverpool for me to be there? There's more benefit to Liverpool if I'm in Peru or Venezuela, or meeting with another sporting director, or meeting with an agent, or going to watch a player. And they said, of course, data forms part of the decisions that are made, but the other thing that kept on coming back was there's a lot more to Michael Edwards than being a number cruncher. He's got a very huge knowledge of the game and a great football brain.
Well, there you go. And if you want more from James Pearce and obviously Simon Hughes and all the rest of the great writers over at The Athletic, including like the likes of Daniel Taylor, Oliver Kay, one of the personal favourites of mine, Michael Cox, then do go over and check that out on theathletic.co.uk using /Redmen TV to get 50% off your subscription. James, thank you very much for joining me once again, taking the time out of your, I'm sure, very busy schedule. It's been an absolute pleasure. Like the video, subscribe to the Redmen TV on YouTube, and we'll see you next time. Ta-ra.